Okay, everyone. I hope you're able to get your handout printed out if you want it. Um, it's a every time I do something, I'm always editing or adding some new stuff or refining it or using the language I've figured out recently. So um, this is a concise little page on boundaries, 2 pages, and kind of opens the doorway for different things for you to learn. So it's 8 o'clock p.m. and it's welcome to the Red Room. Hi, I'm Heather. And first of all, I really want to say that I share with you the best information that I have, and I don't know everything. So some of you may have, and you have had in the past, great ideas to contribute, and I'm always interested in those. And I have opinions, but other people will have more knowledge and more opinions than I do. So I give you my best. Oh boy, look at I got check-ins. Stephanie, Joyce, and Sheree. Yay! Thank you, dears. Okay, tonight. Recently I've had various experiences with people who have tough times with family members, relatives, friends, people at work who don't have very good boundaries. And if you're around other people that don't have good boundaries, that then puts it on you to create the boundary for yourself because they aren't going to do it. And they don't know how. And in the note that I put up there, if you're around someone who is a true narcissist, they really don't understand or have any sensitivity to boundaries. And therefore, in my mind, you're endangered. um, Sweetie Pie just wanted to be sure I'm recording, and yes, darling, I am. He's watching upstairs on his computer. Jack is, that is. um, so tonight, the title of my handout is, this is part of the components that build self-esteem. Self-esteem meaning esteeming yourself as worthy. And you know this, and I know that any of us who have self-doubt, we forget or we have thoughts or feelings that tell us we're not as good as somebody else, or we don't add up, or we're not as capable, whatever it is. The truth is in this, that there is no human soul any better than another, nor any less than another in terms of the value of a soul, the value of a human being. Now, how they behave, that's a whole nother ballgame. And that's why boundaries are important and why self-esteem is important. We want to know when to draw the line. And you know I love the example of how adroit canines are, dogs and wolves and such. When there's something that's crossing their boundaries, that's not what they want, it's not according to their values, and their values are, I'm going to stay alive, I'm going to protect my pops or my den or my food, whatever it is. And if something threatens that, what's the first thing they do? They don't just charge and bite or attack, they growl. As human beings, we need to know how to growl in our own way, with our own language. And sometimes you need to just growl very slightly and people get it. Sometimes you need to actually draw your sword and place it in the ground to get it. Sometimes you do have to defend yourself with somebody or something that's attacking you. But for the purposes of this tonight, I'm just going to talk about the people around you who are negative in some sort, in some way, and they're a detriment to the goodness of your life. Now, some of these people we love. Some of them we are fond of. Some of them we can't exclude from our lives. So we need to be able to set our circumstances up so that they don't cross the line of what's appropriate for us. This is my personal space, and I don't know about you, but I am very very sensitive about my personal space. My office here at home, nobody touches my stuff unless I give them permission. And I don't want them to. Fortunately, I don't have lots of visitors here in this Red Room office. And my private practice office too. That's my personal space. And I welcome people into it, but they're always respectful. And my home is my personal space. And it does offend me when someone comes into my home and they attack me. Maybe they don't intend to attack me. They just get irritable or angry, and that's not about me. But I'm sensitive to that. So I'm sensitive to how people treat me and my personal space. Outside of that, I'm a lot more tolerant and adjustable. And so, you know, there are things when you end up having kids as they grow into teenagers, and you have to tell them what's appropriate and what's not. Sometimes, as I worked with a mom just recently who was a single parent, her teenager's getting older, and frankly, she wasn't around enough, and she didn't draw the boundaries. And she told her daughter it wasn't okay for her to have her boyfriend, let alone have her boyfriend in her room, let alone find them having sex with each other. That was not okay. And since the daughter lied continuously about lots of things, she really didn't have a choice but to say, you can't live here unless you respect my boundaries, my values, what it is that's appropriate. And if you can't live to that, then you'll need to live somewhere else. Fortunately, the father of the child was available, and I didn't hear the end of the story, but that was her decision, that she could no longer allow a teenager to live that way under her roof. Sometimes it's, and this is so pervasive, and I've done many talks and many seminars on the holidays. You know, we all, in America, you know, frankly, we're not very good at holidays. You know why? Because we don't have enough. We've got these 2 or 3 big deals, and then we don't have enough holidays. You know, like in Asia, they have a holiday every week, or there's some way of celebrating something. They've got lots of occasions. And yet when in America, when we have holidays in November and December, there's a lot of emphasis placed on that. And sometimes that's because family members get together that maybe haven't gotten together at all except for during those special occasions. And then if there are irritations, it feels like it's ruined. Somebody drinks too much, somebody's hostile, somebody throws a fit, somebody gets confrontational or insulting. So when you've had those things happen and kind of there's a bad taste in your mouth about, you know, Christmas that year was just ruined, or my wedding reception was ruined, or my Easter was ruined, or my Hanukkah was ruined, whatever it is, whatever holidays it was, sometimes you've been bitten and you didn't know that you needed to protect the occasion, protect the people from somebody who didn't behave appropriately. So chime in if you have an example of when somebody was not appropriate and you have to figure out what to do about that. So I call this my personal space. And you know, if we think about it, the United States of America is right now my personal space. I want to defend America and American ideals and principles and standards from those countries that don't respect that. And so my personal space can expand that far. My personal space can expand as far as we have palm trees in our yard. And darn it, this winter it was so cold, 3 of my babies were killed. So I have a sense of boundaries about palm trees. I just love them. And so I kind of put my arms around palm trees everywhere in the world. So our personal space, what it is that we treasure, can vary widely. So this is about my personal space because that's what's precious to me, what I care about. And then this is balancing privacy and closeness. We need to learn how to be private and alone and have solitude, and to preserve that solitude. If you want to do some journaling, you don't want anybody to disturb you. You want quiet and you want peace and that bit of privacy. When you're dressing for a special night out, you want privacy in your dressing room. You don't want to see him or her watch you get all dolled up. And then closeness. We want to be able to be close and nurturing and affectionate and sharing of things, or intimate. So we want to be able to let the people who are precious to us inside our personal boundaries, provided they respect us when they enter our place. So here we go. Our defenses or our boundaries are formed in childhood. And that means that however you grow up, what kind of a family you were born into, how they did privacy and closeness is what our children, what we as children assumed was the way people live, the way life is, the way it's supposed to be. So I have a quote here from Robert Firestone and Joyce Catlett. And every once in a while I found people that write wonderfully, and these two did, in their book, Fear of Intimacy. And there certainly are many of us who are afraid of intimacy. They argue that relationships fail not for the commonly cited reasons, but because psychological defenses formed in childhood act as a barrier to closeness in adulthood. We kind of know that, don't we? They illustrate how the quote-unquote fantasy bond, a once useful but now destructive form of self-parenting, jeopardizes meaningful attachments. So a fantasy bond of a form of self-parenting, a bond with yourself where you're taking care of yourself because you didn't get what you needed from out there when you were little. So now it's you taking care of you, which means there's not that sense of opening and connecting and having an intimate give and take with a best friend and lover. So that's one way where we get too isolated and we're afraid of bonding. And then, of course, there's the other side where we get enmeshed. Or even, and this is the thing it's so hard. And I'm so glad that as a therapist, as a counselor, I get to say this to people. Emotional incest is a terrible thing, and it is an overly enmeshed bond between parent and child, where the parent is getting their emotional needs met with their child, from their child, or through their child. What I want is an adult to have an adult life with adult friends, activities, a good lifestyle that's, you got work, you got fun, you've got creativity, you have dear friends, and that you're there as an adult to lift up and to parent and tend to your child, not to use your child as your best friend, not to use your child as your sounding board, or when you're scared and upset, you go and confide in your child, even if it's an 18-year-old or a 22-year-old. Emotional incest, the book by, and let me write this down because you need to know about this in case you know somebody who has a problem with an overly tight connection to their parents. Emotional Incest by my wonderful colleague, Pat Love. She's a Texan, she's from Austin, and this book is, it's the thing I stand on when I need to help people who have had their parents walk into their personal space and cross the boundaries. And also when a parent has made their child their best friend, it's like, oh dear, I need somehow to gently and respectfully teach them that they need to disentangle themselves and create their own life. And that's a hard thing to do. If you have any questions or examples of this, please chime in, ask me a question, type me your example. I look forward to that when you do it. So healthy boundaries. Each of us needs to find ways to monitor and to balance appropriate closeness or relationship interaction between being individuated and separate and being intimate. So we want to be able to be intimate with our true intimates, which is no more than, I think, usually 3 people, and to be separate from them as well. When we can be protective of what is appropriate without having to become a doormat, where we just let people roll right on over us and do whatever they want without us saying, well, this doesn't feel respectful to me. A codependent, where you're scared, some people are scared to death to live alone or to be alone. They really are codependent in a certain way. And yet so often when you get to be codependent, when you really are needy and need somebody, ironically, that usually prevents you from having true intimacy. Because in order to bond intimately, we need to be emotionally healthy, happy, balanced, and not needy. Because we want to give, we're not looking to receive. And we want to give, and we're open to all the other person has to give. So if you have any questions about that, just ask me, dears. I hope I'm being clear enough. So codependent, too needy, too bonded, or needing a bond too tight. An isolate, people who don't know how to relate to people, people who don't like people who don't want to be disturbed, they're afraid socially, or a battling warrior. Some people just fight and they want to fight and they push people away all the time. They're suspicious and they're not interested in connecting because they're not sure that they can trust you. Even their intimates they treat that way. So we want to be able to create healthy boundaries so that I have my space and I like it, and you have your space and you like it, and we enjoy each other respectfully that way. So what are boundaries? As we've been talking about, something that sets a border or a limit, sets a physical, emotional, or intellectual or spiritual space. And I'm sure you have all kinds of examples how there you've encountered people who want to walk into your spiritual space and tell you how you should believe, or criticize what you believe, that's your values. And you want to be able to have a dialogue about that, but hold respect for each other. Intellectual. Isn't it sad when you find somebody smart and they've got really good ideas and you want to have a dialogue about that and hear their thoughts and have your thoughts be heard? That's so stimulating, and it's exciting in friendship. And it's sad when you find a friend who can't intellectually respect your thoughts, your ideas, or can't hold theirs in abeyance in order to be interested to hear yours. So intellectual boundaries. And you know that's, I mean, we're not going to go down the road of political, because that's partly intellectual boundaries. It can be emotional, it can be spiritual too. Emotional boundaries, where a lot, and like I was saying, one of the worst ones is emotional incest, where the parent is upset, they go to the child for comfort. Well, no. You want to go to a friend or a beloved or a mentor or a parent, your older parent. We want our children to come for us to comfort them, but it's not for us as adults to extract our own comfort from those who are our children. Here's a question. My wife's sister has, let's just say, socially undesirable habits. Problem is, my wife feels obligated to maintain extended family. Is this something I must simply accept? Fabulous question. Isn't it a fabulous question, everyone? Because this is the art of living, where you can't just say no, goodbye. There needs to be some artful way of handling this. And as I said when we first started tonight, if other people in your life don't know how to be graceful, don't know how to be appropriate and handle themselves, then it falls to us to set it up so that they are managed respectfully. So let's say here, your wife feels obligated to maintain extended family. Yes, so your wife's sister, so that's your sister-in-law. We want to maintain extended family, absolutely. And if the socially undesirable habits are something that you can't control or alter, then you've got several choices. Maybe she's not invited to only certain events. Maybe you need to have a talk with her. Or your wife needs to have a talk with her. Maybe you decide to set certain things up with other people present so that her undesirable habits, most of us behave, quote unquote, in public. So can you tell me a little bit more specifically about what this socially undesirable habit, the area of that might be? That would be helpful, because that could be many things. It could be she drinks too much, could be she talks too loudly and won't listen, could be that she smokes and cusses. I don't know. What is it? Because then we know kind of where we need to draw our boundaries and how to work on that. Sometimes it just takes a talk, a special kind of talk. So if you can give me a little a clue in terms of which direction you're going to need to go, I can mentor you a little bit more accurately. Is this a good question, everyone? Let's look here. Boundaries can be spoken or unspoken, verbal or nonverbal. And maybe with your sister-in-law, it's a nonverbal boundary that you set up. Maybe you have to be verbal. Boundaries are a way to protect ourselves and not create walls that are stiff. It's immature when people say, okay, that person crossed my line, I write them off. They are excluded from my life. They are excommunicated. I'll never talk to them again. Well, that's not emotionally intelligent. It's not managing your life with wisdom and grace. Now, sometimes, yes, if there was a perpetrator of something or other, then not only do we cut them off completely, but we have to take legal action. These I wanted to share with you. There are 40 developmental assets for our children, our teenagers. And there are 3 that have to do with boundaries. So the first one, only 43% of our teenagers in America have this. Healthy family boundaries. The family has clear rules and consequences and monitors the young person's whereabouts. Sad, but even the example of the lady who came to see me, who was very genuine and sincere, she didn't have proper family boundaries for her teenager. 2, 46% of our teenagers don't have this. They don't have good school boundaries, where the school provides clear rules and consequences. And you know how hard it is to choose and to hold on to the consequences when someone goes past our boundaries, like I suspect we're going to talk about your sister-in-law, dear. And the third one, 46% of our teenagers don't have good neighborhood boundaries. The neighbors don't take responsibility for monitoring the young people's behavior, and that's usually because they don't know what to do. So building boundaries, there are damaged boundaries and there are healthy boundaries, and what's in between there are either walled boundaries that are too stiff, too tight like a brick wall, or too loose boundaries. And so let's look at the question that our viewer is saying. He says that she seems to be oblivious to the feelings of those around her. She probably is, especially strangers or even waiters in a restaurant, for example. Yeah, that's not uncommon, is it? She's generally rude. And the amazing thing is that my wife is always polite and courteous, not to an extreme, just naturally so, which is her sister. So it's a mystery to me. How can you respect someone that does not respect you? My supervisor always comes at me each morning like he is upset and rushes me to get out of the office. I'm a postal carrier. How would you handle someone that is angry all the time? Oh, my dear. These are two excellent questions, aren't they? So let's talk about the sister-in-law first, and then we'll talk about your boss, okay, dears? So, it is a mystery, isn't it? If your wife is appropriate and polite, and her own sister is different from her, well, it's always the case that when I do a genogram, which means I draw on my flip chart all the details on a family tree. If I draw a family tree for your wife and then I draw a family tree for your sister-in-law, the dynamics between the family members are going to be different. It will be, two people from the same family, but the family dynamics are different. Now, for example, and I don't know what happened to your sister-in-law, but something happened. So, like, for example, she was ostracized in school, she was made fun of, she was bullied, or she was sexually molested, where her response to that was she needed to defend herself, and she gave up on trusting people. Then she would be angry, she would be suspicious, and kind of bitter about people because of how she'd been treated. And that means that until she matures and decides that there's a good reason for her to be able to be respectful and kind and in a positive relationship with people, she's probably still going to continue to do that. Now, I'm just wondering, just thinking about what your options are. And it depends on how close your wife is with her sister. But it's probably better in an example like that your wife chat with her alone where nobody else, so that she's not humiliated or embarrassed or disrespected in front of anybody else. And if she does this in public, obviously she's not, being in public is not going to motivate her good manners. So your sister is going to, your wife is going to have to talk to her sister and say, talk about her discomfort. And so usually how we want to do that is with cushion statements. So like, for example, your wife could say, and you use true statements, and you've given me some clues. I really value family, and I really like being able to spend time with you. And yet there's something that makes it very uncomfortable for me, and it's really hard for me to talk to you about this. And I wish I didn't have to, because I really don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. And I really do love you. And I want to do that unconditionally, but there's something that I have to say. Now notice, those are all cushion statements. And it's setting up that her sister's now thinking, oh my God, what is it? What's the trouble? What's happening? And then she says what she needs to say. She said, it makes me embarrassed and feel humiliated when you insult people and you're rude in public. Now, I know you probably have a good reason for that. I don't know what it is, but I'm never rude to people in public, and it really feels very uncomfortable for me. And I'm just wondering, I'm just complaining, and I'd like to request a change from you, that you're more appropriate when you're around me. Is there something that you can do about that? So, did that make sense? Do you think that might be helpful to your wife? So that would be my first approach, for your wife to talk to her that frankly, but with those loving, caring cushion statements on either side of the request for change. If your sister-in-law may just say, you're out of line and there's nothing that I'm going to do to change my behavior. In that sense, then frankly, you can't afford to have dinner with her in a restaurant. And then what you do is figure out where she's going to create the least disruption or damage. Maybe that's in her own home, in your home. Maybe it's in the yard. Maybe the way you want to interact with her is in a movie or somewhere where you defend yourself from her rudeness if she says that she's not going to be more appropriate. Does that help? Let me know if that helps, if you think I'm on track with you there. My wife will say, "You're joking. You know she'll never change." I don't know. Have you ever tried? You know, when we communicate that directly, like I just did, about, you know, all the elements involved, and then we say what we want in a very intelligent and well thought out way, it usually gets people's attention. And I'm wondering if your wife has ever had a conversation with her sister like that. She may get interrupted, she may get walked on, I don't know. But if your wife hasn't done that, then she hasn't drawn her boundaries like a gracious lady does. And I want to say, I know it's not fashionable in certain places, but the bottom line for me is my goal is to be a gracious lady. And the archetype there is the great and good queen, where this is my space, and I'm going to ensure that whoever is in my space, including myself, is treated with respect. And if there's something here that isn't respectful, then I will remove it. I won't cuss, I won't be rude, I won't be inappropriate at all, but I will structure my environment to exclude that kind of rudeness or inappropriateness, like a lady would. A gracious lady. Yeah, that's my goal. And that's what I ask us to be. And so often, dear, younger couples will come to my office, and even middle-aged couples, and they're behaving with each other kind of like siblings or roommates or adolescents that are just out to get their indulgences or their fun. And I'll say, you know, if you're wanting to be in a mature relationship that really allows intimacy and quality of life, if you really want to have a beautiful lifestyle, you're going to need to decide to want to be adults, which means a man and a woman, and to take on the roles of being a husband who tends to his wife and his family, of a wife who tends to her husband and her home. And that the utmost of that art form, and I do consider it one of the finest art forms of all life, is to be a gracious lady and to be a gentleman, a fine gentleman. A gracious lady and a fine gentleman are, how do I say, so powerful that no matter what ripples or bombs go off in their presence, they hold their equanimity. They don't throw tantrums. They don't get upset. They hold their equanimity, their peace, and they solve problems. And they preserve that which is quality in life all around them, inside themselves, in their personal space, and in their professional space. When that happens, everyone around us feels good. They can laugh, they can relax, be happy, and they feel cared for. In the Red Room, I try very much to conduct myself as a gracious lady that is kind and loving and makes it safe for you. Maybe those are the words my wife needs. Isn't it interesting? I call this, and it's the book I'm working on, as many of you know, The Power of Naming. If I can name a part of myself that I like to be, I move into that role and use those qualities of my personality, of how I express myself. So if I move into the role of the gracious lady, immediately I know exactly how that looks, how that sounds, and how I behave internally and externally. So a gracious lady would never allow rudeness in her domain. Never. It's inappropriate. Insults are not ever okay. Behavior that is crude and rude is not allowed. I had to draw that boundary not too long ago. We had a pool party, and the kids, the 20-somethings came over, and they were behaving, some of the guys were behaving like they do when they're watching sports in a sports bar. And they were using some guy language, shall we put it that way, stag party language, billiards language. And I stopped them and I said, guys, this is my home, and we don't use language like that here. You can use that language, when you're playing pool or drinking beer or whatever, but not here. I have a beautiful home, and we don't do that. They got it. They've been great ever since. I needed to draw my boundaries like a lady, and I got respect right away. So good. The gracious lady and the fine gentleman. Now the fine gentleman in you also, dear, wants to respect your gracious lady, which means you don't want anyone in her environment that would be insulting, crude, or rude. It's inappropriate, and you don't allow that. And the way you stop it is with grace as well. And that means that you don't throw back the insults, you don't get rude, you don't stomp off, you don't say, well, that's never happening again, I'm writing her off. No, you do it with respect yourself. And I hope I've given you enough clues now to where where you can see your sister-in-law entering your space, because you've already chosen where she enters, as I said before, and where you don't invite her, because then that place where she doesn't behave herself well, you protect yourselves and everybody else from her until she figures it out. And she may never, and that's okay. We're going to love her and have a relationship with her wherever it works. Thank you so much. Okay, now let's talk about the person who says that they are a postal carrier. Let's look at my time. It's 8:37. Good. I love that question. So this is a professional boundary. Excellent. How can you respect someone who does not respect you? Well, I'm sure most of you have heard the idea that if I'm in the position of being an intelligent, mature person, I will respect everybody, but I definitely won't respect their misbehaviors. Like our children. We love our children, but we don't respect when they're rude, when they're insulting, when they're, betraying themselves and their own honor and our honor by doing something, lying, cheating, misbehaving in certain ways. That behavior is not acceptable. It's not appropriate. And we draw the boundary saying, I won't have that. This is what we need. But you still love the person. You still respect the soul. You still respect the person. So this person is obviously not happy and not well adjusted in certain ways. We're going to respect every human being, but how they behave, that's a whole other thing. So my supervisor always comes at me each morning like he's upset and rushes me to get out of the office. Okay, so there are various things that you could do, and you might want to try certain things and try gentle things and see if that works. That doesn't work, try another thing. The first thing, of course, and this is the hardest thing, this really is the hardest thing, because you have to be really adroit. You've got to be really smart. But the very first and most effective approach to most difficult things is with a sense of humor. Now, a sense of humor takes a lot of smarts, and it takes a very strong positive attitude, and it takes a little twinkle in the eye. And when somebody's hitting you with anger and grouchiness and negativity, it's really hard to stay with a sense of humor. And this comes to my favorite definition of courage. You know what it is? Courage. And for this particular circumstance, it does take courage. Courage in the highest level is what I call determined morale. That means no matter what, I am going to have a positive attitude. So I'm going to type this for you. Courage is determined morale. No matter what happens, you're determined to have a positive attitude. So now, somebody who is really angry and negative, sometimes you try to be positive with them and they're going to snipe back at you and say, well, that was a smart-ass thing or a snide comment. They won't take it with good cheer. So that doesn't work. You know, sometimes it's as simple as saying something like, you know what? I'm really happy to get out there and to deliver the mail. I love my job, and I'd really like appreciation from you, or just free and easy from you. It'd be much nicer if you get what I mean. Now, you may not be able to do that. You may not be able to say that, but that would be my first approach. If this person is kind of going to listen to you and be responsive. There are people who are so angry, so bitter, so negative, so down in the mouth, and just hate life and hate people that that'll make it worse. So we need to be able to balance that. So someone who is angry all the time. My first approach, of course, because I'm a counselor, is to validate them. So if we want to move something, the first thing is to, what I think of as, let's make friends with it. So to sincerely say, you know, you feel, we're not going to use, it seems like you're really mad. No, we're not going to say, sounds like you're really pissed off or angry. No, we're going to say, just frustrated. You know, Bob, it seems like every morning you're really frustrated. And, you know, I'm not sure what to do, but I'd like to help you with it. Or somehow validate that he or she is frustrated and saying, I can feel you're frustrated about something. What is it that you need? What can I do to help you with your frustration? So you validated the frustration. We don't want to say angry or pissed off or mad, but usually if you go back behind what started the anger, it's irritation or tension or frustrated. So you can use those words to say, gee, it seems like you're tense this morning. Can I help? Well, that may be something they've never heard somebody say, because it takes courage to say that, to, you know, validate the frustration or whatever it is. So that's one of the things. I would validate it and then offer help, offer assistance. Some people just do not respond to that. So then sometimes if somebody is angry all the time, you being cheerful all the time makes it even worse. So I'm not sure what kind of a personality you're dealing with here. Sometimes people get angry and frustrated because they're hurting inside, or because they hate their job, or because they're in a bad marriage that they can't get out of, or because they've got a narcissistic child that's just mean and ugly, or because, you know, they're close to retirement, they're exhausted, and they just never take time off because they don't like people. So it's hard to tell what's underneath anger, because anger, there's so much usually that's underneath layers and layers of anger. I'm wondering, can you give me a clue? if you've been around this supervisor for a while, you've probably got some ideas of what might be the irritation or the frustration or the tension that's giving you this wall of anger. Can you give me a clue about that? That'd be cool. Let's see. Okay. I needed to scroll down, sorry. Okay. Well, when I try to talk to him, he rudely walks away, and at times, and I give in and say, if I did anything wrong, I apologize. But how much more can I take if I feel like I didn't do anything wrong? So do your apologies work? Maybe you didn't do anything wrong. Are you being accused of something? When I try to talk to him, he rudely walks away. Does he do this just to you, or does he do this to everybody? If he does this just to you, then if he or she won't talk to you, yeah, it's a him. If he won't talk to you, then that means that you want to go to the supervisor above him. Okay. Oh, everybody. So it's not about you, dear. Okay. So, you know, if I were the supervisor in charge of that department, I would behave like the gracious queen, which says, if there's a bad apple here, the bad apple needs to get better, or the rotten apple is tossed out. And we do have ways in the business world for dealing with that. Now, sometimes that's not very easy at all. So I would say that somebody needs to have the courage to go to talk to human resources and to say about this bad attitude, and then that person is called in and they have a conversation about improving their attitude and their respect for the people around them. So that would be my favorite thing to happen. Now, you and I know that sometimes, whatever in the business world, leadership is not competent enough to take care of a situation like that. Then what you want to do is you want to talk to your supervisor, I mean the HR person, whoever it is that you talk to about this, and to say, if this doesn't change, can I change my job? So there's that whole thing. And I know you know what I'm talking about, if you're a professional, about how we make sure that if there's a rotten apple in the company or the department, we protect everybody from that. It's not fair for everybody to be treated that way. It's not professional. And if I were there, I wouldn't have it. I would talk to that person and I would, have them either be more appropriate and cheerful and professional, or I would have them in a communication class or whatever it is, or put them somewhere where they don't talk to anybody. So that's what I would do if I were the queen of that domain. However, bottom line, if there's nothing that you have been able to influence or can't influence in the next few weeks or months, you need to become, kind of like Teflon. And now this is a real test of some of us when we can't change somebody else and we can't change our circumstances. But if you're in this role indefinitely and you like what you do, this is not going to be good enough. Something has to change. Somebody like that is a destructive influence with the team. So for the time being, the very best bet for you is to almost inside shift yourself into another role where that person becomes pretty much invisible to you, where you don't take anything that they say to heart. And I'm not sure if I should do this, but sometimes we need to make them into a funny cartoon character so that they don't touch us at all. And I know I've talked previously about Eeyore. Now, Eeyore is kind of grumpy and sad and sour, but then this guy sounds like he's a real troll, a real grouch. So do you know that story about the troll, the grouchy, ugly troll underneath the bridge? Or do you know the cartoon character, and this is one of my favorites, but you may not be as old as I am, Foghorn Leghorn. Foghorn Leghorn is this rude, clueless bully of a big red rooster. And Foghorn Leghorn is really funny. He's such a stupid bully. So that's one of the ways to kind of defuse, or what I call deglamorize, somebody that is that inappropriate, and that kind of behavior doesn't deserve respect. So then I make them into a funny cartoon character, like the troll, or like Foghorn Leghorn. Does that make sense? Do you think that, does anybody out there have an example of one of those crusty old characters, from a movie or a soap opera or a cartoon or a book or something? The troll, or Foghorn Leghorn is kind of like Archie Bunker, only worse. Yes. What? Tell me. I love having grouchy characters that I can use with people who are being beaten down. It's not right, it's not fair, and we won't take it, and we make it funny so that whatever they say, it's like inside. No body language outside, but inside you're saying, here comes the troll. Here comes old Foghorn Leghorn again. We don't do it outside, just outside you're a gentleman, you're a lady, but inside you're kind of chuckling. Here's the old geezer. Okay, you guys, give me some examples about, those grouches. That's, if you can't change the external, you've got to change the internal. You've got to protect your own boundaries with your own attitude and your own thought process. Does that make sense? Okay, we've got a few minutes and I want to kind of whip through the rest of your handout for tonight. And thank you so much for chiming in. Thank you. Aren't those great examples and questions? Notice how setting good boundaries, the purpose of setting a boundary is to take care of yourself. We know all this. To create or preserve yourself. Don't set boundaries to manipulate. So I didn't want to be disrespectful to the sister-in-law. We don't want to manipulate her. We just want to make it safe for her. So we're not going to put her down or make fun of her or insult her. We're going to be a lady and a gentleman. Many alternatives and options. Some may be more rigid than others, such as with lying, physical abuse, pornography, addiction, insults, etc. Some people are afraid to set or to soften boundaries and then to follow through. If you have difficulty with this, seek professional help for yourself. You're worth it. Give me a phone call, email me, chat with me. When you know that you're a little too soft or when you give in, make sure you remember about how I teach boundaries with sandwich no or with cushion statements, which means you have to say the truth, but that you cushion it on either side with things that are positive. You're so welcome, dear. Thank you for your thank you. So how we sabotage our boundaries. And we're talking about the sister-in-law. Boy, does she sabotage everybody else's boundaries around her, doesn't she? She just walks right over like a steamroller. A grouchy, negative, hurtful one. And the grouchy old boss, supervisor, boy, is he sabotaging the boundaries. So we may be afraid to be alone, or conversely afraid of being bonded or intimate. And so, we don't hold our boundaries. We may feel guilty or selfish about saying no, like the gentleman's wife. We may be too selfish, and we may need to be more sensitive, respectful or empathy for others, like the sister-in-law. We're not free to be responsible because we allow someone else to control us. We're afraid to be accountable for what is ours. Now, it's hard in that postal carrier's example, isn't it? Because when you're dealing with a supervisor, you've got to be respectful to the supervisor, and you've got to do what they say. But not, you know, in the United States of America, in North America, um, being manipulative and being coercive, being abusive, it's against the law. It really is. We don't tolerate that. Oh, I like this quote from Paul Mecker. Codependency is the fallacy of trying to control interior feelings by controlling people, things, and events on the outside. And maybe that angry supervisor is trying to control people on the outside because they've got something going on that they can't control inside or in their personal life. Format for healthy boundaries. You want to be specific. You want to know exactly what you're asking for. Reasonable, enforceable, natural, and logical. So here's a format. If you do this, you know, if you're rude at the table in a restaurant, I will remind you that we don't. I will remind you that we are polite to people. And if you continue to be rude, I won't invite you to dinner in a restaurant in the future. That would be a hard one to say, wouldn't it? But there you go. That's the truth. Sometimes you can tell the truth. Sometimes you've got to be more subtle. Depends on the personality, right? And so here are examples, some for verbal abuse or insults, for breaking plans and commitments, for chemical abuse. And then when you do it, if you have done something to go over the boundaries or be inappropriate or insulting to someone, when I said that terrible thing to you, I apologize, and instead, I want to be respectful in the future, and can I make restitution by taking you out to lunch or by telling you all the good things that I know and feel about you. And then this wonderful quote from Laurel Mellon. I'm going to read this to you, and I know it's on your handout if you have it. What if we stopped focusing on the symptoms, stopped thinking about what is wrong with us, and stopped relying so heavily on external support? What if we simply trusted the inherent strength, goodness, and wisdom of the human spirit? What if we strengthened the skills that enable us to access what is right with us, then watch the symptoms one by one fade away? And of course, she's speaking to people, those of us who sometimes have low self-esteem or don't feel robust enough to draw the lines and to say no to the things that are inappropriate. We're winding down for the hour. Does anyone have a last comment or a suggestion, what you'd like me to talk about sometime in the future? Or do you have a lingering question about what we looked at this evening in terms of drawing good boundaries and maintaining them respectfully for ourselves? Okay, it was a pleasure to finally hear you tonight. Aw, you tuned in for the first time. I look forward to hearing your next topic. Love you, Heather, Joyce, and Sheree. Aw, thank you, dears. Thank you so much, Heather. Oh, thank you for tuning in. You can tell how much I love it when you tune in and when you give me questions, because then it's real, then it's practical. It's not just theoretical and ideas. We're working to improve our lives, to improve our skills with living to the next level of who we can be and how we can structure our lives for something better. There's always better, always, no matter where you are. It's 8:58. We got a couple of minutes left. So I wanted to share with you, I did have a lesson about boundaries. It was so special. A young woman going to school abroad emailed me a lengthy interaction between her and someone there in the school, and how he just was clueless about her boundaries. And she's been raised as a young lady, and she was floored. I mean, she was gracious, she was generous, she was respectful and kind, and this person just kept walking, and doing things that she'd never experienced before. So she said, "What do I do?" And I said, "Well, you've got to tell him in no uncertain terms that he's not welcome at all." Hi, little sister. Thank you for tuning in. So I'm going to read to you what I wrote to help her draw boundaries with this guy. So I said, saying "go away" with clarity and courtesy. I endeavored to convey to you with utmost courtesy that your behaviors and expectations were inappropriate assumptions about my time, my relationships, and my priorities. Since my polite words, gestures, and reminders have not been sufficient, I shall be direct. Now notice this is a gracious lady talking. I am respectful, and I behaved respectfully to you in friendly conversation, and when out of thoughtlessness and a lack of self-reliance, you needed assistance. I enjoyed the conversations built on acquaintanceship, as I do with other people I encounter in different places, but you have crossed the boundary of respect. I am clear about social, professional, and personal boundaries of appropriateness, which provide for various investments of time for both connection and for privacy. I thought I had expressed adequately that I have priorities elsewhere. So, there's another paragraph. I won't take the time to read it to you, but then I put, "Therefore, I respectfully request that you withdraw from my life and stop expecting anything from me. I have chosen personal and professional priorities which consume all of my time and attention," etc., etc. "I did not read your emails," etc., etc. And then at the end, "I request that you turn your attentions to other endeavors and away from me completely." So I gave her a letter, and she edited a little bit, but how a lady says, "Get out of my life. You're insulting me and you're clueless." But you can say it like a lady or a gentleman always can. If you need my help on it, give me a call, email me, and I'll write you one or I'll forward that one to you too. So thank you so much for tuning into the Red Room tonight. I'm Heather Carlisle, and it's so wonderful to hear from you and to know that in this kind of discussion, we can make a difference happen. Thank you so much, dears, and good night. Thank you, Jack. He's saying awesome, baby. Isn't he a sweet husband? I have the best husband for Heather, that is. All right. Good night, everyone.